that's for me, living life so merrily. It's so easy, can't you see? Polka, polka, that's for me. Polka, polka, everyone come along.
Welcome back to the Talk and Shoot Boxing Podcast. I'm Miguel Iturrate, and we're going to talk some shoot about the world of boxing. And this is edition number 61 of the podcast. Thanks for joining us for all those other previous editions. Now, the subject for this one, and I've touched on it before, but you're going to have to go way back in the archives to hear another take. I'll probably repeat some stuff here on this podcast just because, you know, it's been a real long time. Because the subject here is something real controversial, real big in the news, and that's steroids and PEDs. This week, the news broke that the Nevada State Boxing Commission had suspended Canelo Alvarez 6 months for his suspension for his positive PED test. The fight with Gennady Golovkin, ostensibly is canceled. And that's going to, provide the facade of a punishment, I guess, for this guy. Even though it's not really, basically what happened is nothing, except for we lose the May 5th fight. Obviously, Gennady Golovkin going to be stepping in to fight Vanes Martirosyan, the last-minute replacement. Not a lot of expectations of Martirosyan to win. He's smaller. He's been off for a couple of years. He's not a huge puncher, so Golovkin's probably going to have his way. But, you kind of had to expect that for Golovkin. He's not going to take on a hard fight with 10 days notice or whatever, the case may be here. A couple of weeks, basically. 3 weeks, say. So, but Canelo, reportedly on social media, he got a knee scoped or he got some work done on a knee or an ankle or something, but he got some work done that, he wouldn't have gotten done if he was fighting. So, at this point, he's kind of accelerated those things. He's taking the time off to heal and to do the right thing. So, it's kind of an interesting situation. He got no fine financially. It's something where we're probably the suspension's up in August, so we're probably going to get the Gennady Golovkin Canelo Alvarez fight this year. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, I guess we got to see the fight, right? It's one of those things where we got to see the fight, but he tested positive for steroids, so shouldn't there be a punishment? I mean, if the fight didn't happen or if it got extended or whatever, Golovkin next year should probably say, I'm not in the mood to fight Canelo. I'm getting older, and I don't know. I just don't like it because I don't feel like the punishment's there. I feel like Canelo's going to get his fight. He's going to get his payday. With the way the news breaks, I think this is what we're going to do for this podcast. And that is, I'm going to ask this question right now at the very beginning. Then I'm going to talk for a little bit just about the circumstances of PEDs, not only in boxing, but MMA and really all of sport, because it all is tied together. Here's the part of it is, if you're trying to count on the boxing commissions to govern it, you're talking about, okay, then who's governing baseball? Baseball is. You're talking about who's, governing football or soccer. And, I don't know that a lot of soccer players have tested positive, but I imagine that it could be a potential problem there. The types of drugs that bicyclists like Lance Armstrong did that open up your lungs. Even Alexander Povetkin was guilty of a drug that supposedly allows your lung intake to increase, So, with all that going on internationally in other sports, it's like, if you're going to police this, and that's my argument, and that's what the question of the poll of podcast 61 is going to be is, should we just forget about steroids or steroid policing and testing? Should we switch over to more of like a monitoring system where the guys say, hey, look, we got the best doctors, they're now dedicated to, monitoring your health, monitoring, everything going on, and we take it like a scientific experiment. And, I know we're talking about human beings and you don't like to hear, they're scientific experiments, but these are adults and they're doing it anyway. They're sticking stuff in their bodies anyway. And that's the thing is, at that point, at least there's going to be medical care and medical, supervision and things. And isn't that something that might be cheaper in the long run than what would policing be? Which policing being, preventing and things like that. So let's get right into the process. And again, I was just reading today that Lance Armstrong settled a lawsuit with the U.S. Postal Service. Now, the deal with this was, and this is high-level stuff. I'm no lawyer, but I'm interested in the nooks and crannies of the steroid question because I really think it's a lost cause. I don't think that we can fight, the abuse overall. I think the history of man and the history of sport tell us that we're not going to be able to do it. And, the resources are going to be limited. The resources are always going to be tilted the other way. So let's go ahead and talk. So anyway, Lance Armstrong, he settled a lawsuit with the Postal Service. Now, obviously, he used to race with the Postal Service on the American team, with the eagle on the chest and the whole thing. And, the idea was that he committed fraud while representing the Postal Service, and that's a no-no, so they sued him, and it could have been $100 million that he lost. The fact that he's got $100 million, that tells you about the little yellow wristband campaign and how much money actually he was making and stuff like that. All kind of disingenuously, while saying, no, I don't do steroids, he made a lot of money. So here was a shot at maybe taking some of that away from him. Is that the right thing to do? I don't know. I don't think it is, I mean, money made is money made. At the end, he's got to live with himself. That's the, I don't know. But the point is he settled a lawsuit for $5 million. So, the whoever was litigating that, whoever was attacking him, going for the money, kind of cashed out. They grabbed a little bit and ran away. And Lance is still living in a beautiful home, with his memories. Maybe there's about 7 spots where he used to have, a yellow jersey or whatever the jersey is for the Tour de France is on his wall that are no longer there. That'd make him sad, but, having $95 million still in the bank is probably going to be helping him out, So anyway, the point is Lance Armstrong, at the end of the day, he's maybe one of the worst offenders, in terms of just the fact that he did a Bill Clinton. He came out and he said, no, I'm good. I didn't do it. I'm not having an affair with that woman, That kind of thing. He came out and said he didn't do it. He denied and then got caught. And then he was kind of like, oh, okay, we're going to 12-step this. And then, I'm trying to make amends. And $5 million should make amends to the Postal Service, that sort of stuff. It's all by talk. It's all interesting talk. The bottom line is no one cares. And Lance Armstrong is going about his day. But so that's what's going on, Money, at the end of the day, the Lance Armstrong saga is still playing itself out in courts now, 10 years later. How does that help active, people in the sport now? There's no way, shape, or form. So that's part of the reason the current process is broken. Now, let's get into a little bit more of how the current process is broken. At the end of the day, you got this VEDA testing, and VEDA is, this voluntary organization that is made up of, and I have no doubt that it's made up of good doctors, and doctors with good intention, And that's the problem with some of this is the ethics of many medics and doctors in the business. And I think we could take some of that away by saying, look, here are all the good doctors. Come to us, good doctors. They'll give you advice. You can do whatever you want. If you want to drink mule piss, you can drink mule piss, but at least these guys are going to take care of you and monitor you and, tell you better stop drinking the mule piss if something's happening to you. But you know what I mean? The point is switch over to a monitoring and care system. All the doctors can do what they're paid to do, what they really should be doing, which is administering to the athletes, not litigating and maintaining lists. But what VEDA does is VEDA says, look, we're going to make a list of all the illegal drugs. And again, this has been gone over, but it's worth going over again, point by point. Listen to this. So you got a guy like Alexander Povetkin who got caught taking, I don't know exactly what the drug was for. It was for, some type of stimulation or something like that. But what it basically does is it gives you more oxygen. So maybe there are people deprived of oxygen or who need this as a drug, But the abusive side of it is that an athlete who doesn't really need the drug can take it, and he can take in a certain percentage more oxygen, which makes him a more effective, athlete, especially in combat sports. So Povetkin's taking this drug. Now, at once upon a time, back in 2014, Povetkin could have been, inhaling this stuff. He could have been shooting it into the back of his eye. He could, whatever way, suppositories, whatever way he could have put it in his body, it was legal. It was only, and that's the major problem. It's not even like there's really, much that can be done about it, but this is the way science and the medical community works. So somewhere along the line, somebody figured out, hey, these Russian guys, and, I'm just going to say paraphrase, but, these Russian doctors have this medicine for your high blood pressure or whatever, and Povetkin, it increases your lung capacity, and Povetkin's taking it, and Sharapova is taking it in tennis, and there are a bunch of people that are popping up on this, and they're high level people, so maybe the enhanced oxygen works. So let's take this drug and put it on the list. So these people were abusing it legally. So what happened was they got put on a list. So now all of a sudden they take a drug test from him, and because he's on a list, the drug he's taking is on a list. Now all of a sudden he blows hot, And then there's all the arguments and all the science and all the doctors that can say no, but it was trace amounts and he didn't have enough to really be abusing it. It looks like, it was tainted meat. Then comes all the litigation. That's doctors not doing doctor work. That's doctors not administering care. That's doctors filing paperwork and arguing with each other over his .02 or .04 and that's where the doctors really lose grip on, the Hippocratic oath in my book. But we're not going to overcome that. So like I said, if you switch all that over to just care, let the guys come in and report themselves. Because at the end of the day, so the drug got on the list. They were able to abuse it for forever beforehand until it got evaluated and tested and looked at. And this is not like, hey, we got a feeling the Russians are abusing this. They had numbers behind it that gets this drug put on the list. And the numbers were that there's a high percentage of athletes that are testing positive for this from the Eastern Bloc and blah, blah, blah. And now we monitor and watch them, watch performance, watch this, what are they doing and that sort of stuff. And then the drug gets put on the list. So there's too much time, years literally, where a drug can be out there and legal for people to use that eventually is going to be considered a steroid because it gets put on the list. So now what gets put on the list? Now, I'll tell you this. Anybody who's watching the news lately knows relations with Russia and the West are not good. So now I'm going to ask this, the Veda, how does this Russian drug get put on the list? Is there some politics involved? Well, Russian athletes are, they're banned from the Olympics. There's definitely politics involved, so that's where everything starts to be like, where's the medical, where's the process of, real fairness here? The drugs are going to be legal for years before they're made illegal. And when they're made illegal, the athletes could still be on them or could still show trace amounts, which leads to paperwork, litigation, and black eyes for the sport. And at the end of the day, the propensity to cheat in humans just goes back in time, and here, I'm going to tell a couple old-time stories here, and we're going to go back, maybe tell my age and, maybe show people I do read a little bit just because I'm going to go back in time. We're going to talk about, I'm going to say the name Charles Atlas. Okay, now, if you look at Charles Atlas, I'm sure that the Charles Atlas, diets and things like that included some type of, monitoring of the diet, watching what you eat, low fat, or whatever. And I don't know, in what I'm talking about with Charles Atlas, for those who don't know Charles Atlas was a physical fitness guru from the last century. He died in 1972, but he spawned a whole industry of, supplements and physical care and things. And the guy, if you look at him, the guy was a physically fit guy. But that's number one here, because I'm going to tell you about the eye test. You know what I mean? The bottom line is a good doctor I know told me, I said, how do you, can you tell people are on steroids? He said, first thing you do is look at, give them an eye test. Look them over, and if they just look overly fit, or there's been a drastic change, like, they were kind of chubby in their 20s, and then all of a sudden they were, in their mid-30s, they got 8-packs, that sort of stuff. The eye test will tell you the first big question mark, That's the first thing. When a guy's body starts to change, when a guy, starts to get faster when he's 30. Does that really happen in normal real life? Do people get faster at 30? Well, they work out a lot. Ooh, yeah. Yep. None of that adds up. You know what I mean? It just doesn't add up with real science unless they're getting some help. So, there's part of the problem. Now you start to look at it. Now go back and look at Charles Atlas. Look at pictures of Charles Atlas. Even the most ripped pictures of him, and there are a lot of them out there. There's something about the guy's body. Yeah, the guy looks like that orangey color that I associate with steroids, but I kind of think that comes from tanning pills or the sprays and things. And Charles Atlas, what I'm saying is, 75 years ago when he was the physical fitness guy, just look at his body and look at people's bodies now. The size, the type of muscle composition, and bodybuilders from that era, they didn't have 8-packs, and muscles on muscles, and that sort. Guys have taken it to a completely different level, and some of that was done in a laboratory with chemistry, and so times have changed a lot since Charles Atlas, but Charles Atlas is the first, real hint in history where you see that this is a culture. People want to look good, so the steroid, the idea that you can get an enhancement and stuff, it's only in sports and combined sports that these types of things become monitored for illegality. If you're a guy who goes to a gym and wants to, look good when he goes to the beach, nobody's monitoring you. Nobody's drug testing you for steroid. Now even at work, they're more worried about weed than steroids. And before I wrap up and go to a break here, let's talk about weed and steroids, right? Now, the Nevada Commission that claims, they suspended Canelo for 6 months and they're taking action, right? I mean, they're the same idiots that suspended Nick Diaz for 5 years for marijuana. Yeah, it was his second appearance, but it's marijuana. Compared to a performance enhancer the guy says he got from tainted meat, and he gets 6 months, a slap on the wrist, and really no fine, and nothing in terms of a real delay in his career or anything like that. So just hypocrites, But we get back to Charles Atlas. Just look at look at the way bodies have changed in the way. Now again, people have a tendency to shave the bodies, and nowadays, and the muscle maybe becomes a little more visible and that sort of stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just the 8-packs and the enhancements that come from a needle, and sometimes you can see them in people, especially with the changes. Now, when I get back to you, after a short break here, I'm going to show you or talk to you about the story of Ad Walgast. The following is an excerpt from Jose Corpus's Black Ink, a story of boxing, betrayal, homophobia, and the first Latino champion. Against Jeff Dixon's protests, Al Brown was set to defend his bantamweight title against Kid Francis in Marseille. "It's stupid," exclaimed Dixon. "Stupid, stupid, stupid." As soon as Brown arrived, the promoters in Marseille did everything they could to make the champion feel comfortable. They provided unlimited liquor, the best foods, and VIP access to all the best clubs. Prostitutes of all shapes and colors were made available. All Brown or anyone in his entourage had to do was ask. Francois Spiritu had plenty of experience with prostitutes. He ran prostitution rings in Egypt, France, Spain, and North Africa. It was in Egypt that he had met Paul Carbone. They partnered in a variety of endeavors, including a cheese smuggling ring and drug and arms trafficking. Carbone became the godfather of the Marseille underworld, with Spirito a trusted capo. Aside from his responsibilities as a mediator of the French underworld, where he settled disputes between rival gangsters at his bar named Friendly, Spirito allegedly fixed fights for his cousins. One of Kid Francis's fights was billed, announced, and reported as a match against American Georgie Mack. It would have been a good win for the fighter had it happened. Months later, it was revealed that it was not Mack, not even a boxer, in the ring that day, but a local dock worker. The night of the fight, Spirito sat directly behind one of the judges. With one official already understanding his role, a second official needed to be convinced. Unbuttoning his jacket and holding it back far enough to let his piece show, he spent the night loudly giving his version of the blow-by-blow. "Another round for Francis," he bellowed at the end of each round. "No way Francis loses this fight, no way." When Brown landed a combination, Spirito quickly chimed in, "Missed." "Brown is hurt" was another one of his favorite lines that night. The crowd was not much different. Each time Francis threw a volley, they roared as one. When Brown did, there was silence. The crowd was silent most of the night. "One more round and we have a champion," shouted Spirito throughout the final round. "Just one more round," he said while rising to his feet. He was joined by dozens as the entire arena chanted for the hometown fighter. But the official, Dr. James Sparks, commanding officer of the American Legion in France, was not the type who phased easily. Not even when guns, at least 4, were brandished as he tabulated his score after the 14th round. A man described by newspapers as a hoodlum saw that Sparks had Brown winning the fight by a large margin. He thrust his revolver below Sparks' bottom rib and demanded he hand him the card. Sparks did, and when the bell rang for the final round, he climbed onto the ring apron and advised the referee of what happened. The referee had his own problems by then. At the end of each round, gangster types reminded him that Francis was to win the fight. He ushered Sparks off the apron and back to his seat, which was no longer there. In its place was about a half a dozen men who pinned him against the ring, in a way Francis wished he'd been able to pin Brown along the ropes. Spirito and his crew blew their tops. More guns were drawn and shots were fired into the air. Shouts of "change it" were overheard while a few of them grabbed Sparks and tried to make him change his card. Sparks refused and gangsters ripped the scorecard into tiny pieces. One of them shoved the pieces into Sparks' mouth and made him eat them. Someone threatened to kill him while one bashed his head from behind and sent a stream of blood down his back. The Italian referee, wanting to make it back to Milan in one piece, held aloft his own card in the middle of the ring and, before disappearing for almost an hour, shouted, "Look, I voted for Francis." Now was when Brown needed his legs most. He, his handlers, and the third official took off for the dressing rooms while a growing mob chased them. Fists started to rain down on Sparks' face while others decided to take their anger out on the seats. Someone tried to set fire to the ring, but the canvas didn't ignite. Women fainted, bottles were thrown, and random faces were punched. You can find Jose Corpus's Black Ink at Amazon.com. Hey, I'm back here, and we're talking about steroids here on Talking Shoot Boxing Podcast number 61. And here's the other part of it is the propensity for an athlete to look for an edge is as old as time, and it's not going to go away. What it's going to do is, I think, if we continue to police the way we're policing, putting things on a list a couple years later, it's going to create an atmosphere like in baseball with the creams and things like that, where people are just going to be creating drugs that aren't legal, haven't been looked at legally yet, and they're not illegal because it's not on the list. And when you get doctors, and there's money involved in this, so there's always going to be doctors who are producing that sort of stuff and, hitting athletes up, for, hey, I got something for you, or this or that, and it's not illegal, and, people listen, Even if a couple of the athletes listen, it's out there. These guys are going to be out there because the system breeds them. So, I ask you again, should we keep these things legal, With the amount of time it takes out there, forget about the fact is an American could go to Russia and people are going to collect blood and piss in Russia that's going to be tested by a lab somewhere in the States. How do you get it from Russia over there? Yeah, are you going to bring people over there who are going to keep the PP on lockdown? Is that what's going to have to happen? And even if that is, what are you going to do? You have a security team of 30 guarding the piss? And what if, in Russia, a couple of buses pull up with some dudes that want to check the piss or taste the piss or switch the piss? I'm not saying that those things are kept, but when you're talking about what has gone on in Russia, prior to the Sochi Olympics and things like that, where they took the entire lab and replaced all the doctors with KGB agents, they're capable of that. So if a security team of 30 can be overcome, where do you draw the line? How do you get the material to a laboratory to test in a way that's ethical, And here's the other part. Veda has got all these good doctors and stuff like that, but Veda doesn't have employees in every country. They don't have employees that are ready to go to every event where a Veda fighter is going to fight, not to mention whatever other events they are monitoring out there, but they don't have the capabilities of sending somebody to every single event to monitor the taking of the samples and the testing and all that. They count on volunteers at a local level. How dangerous is that, knowing the world the way we know? What about Africa, where, if you look at corruption monitors all over the world, Africa leads the league. South America, where there's tons of boxing, and not great corruption indexes. What does that mean? That means to me that whatever commissions or whatever entities are there that are supposed to be monitoring just combat sports, just the boxing and the MMA that are there, are going to be underfunded, and there's a wide range of athletes that have a lot of incentive to really do good, to get to the top, to make money. You don't make money in MMA unless you're in the UFC. And as a Mexican boxer, you can have 100 fights for your career and put food on the table, or you can get to the big time. And, how many people are going to turn down a lab or a doctor or a guy that says, hey, I'm a physical, there's a well-known boxer, John Scully, the Ice. John Scully, contender in the 1980s, 90s, and still good spokesperson for the sport. And, he noticed that a lot of this came in with the sports nutritionists and the strength and conditioning coaches and stuff. And that's where, the science and the education meets, and that's where you have like an unpoliceable mess. And I think that is something that's noticeable now. you got the trainer, and you got maybe a guy who's the sparring partners, and then you also have these strength and conditioning coaches and nutritionists and things. And what do these guys, what's the nutritionist do? Is he, baking chicken for you so you stop frying it? Or is he, on the cutting edge of, powders and pills and things that are coming out for physical conditioning, lose fat, all this other stuff. So it's a very dangerous situation there. But then we wanted to talk about Ad Walgast. So now, Ad Walgast, if you look back in the history of boxing, Ad Walgast defeated Badley Nelson for the World Lightweight Championship in 1910. Walgast is a sad figure because he is probably the poster boy for, brain injuries in boxing. He spent the last 20-something years of his life in an institution with his brain damage, and he's really, really a sad case. If you look up Ad Walgast, aside from all the boxing stuff that comes up on the internet, if you get in a couple pages of searching in Google and stuff like that, you'll find that there are medical texts that mention him and bring him up as the punch-drunk, boxers and things like that. So he's not real well known, except for boxing freaks and boxing historians, but he's a guy that really, his story, when you tell it, affects everybody's life. So now, he lost the belt. By 1915, 1917, he'd been in a mental institution already. His wife had taken over his money. He'd made about $250,000, which is a ton of money as a boxer. He bought land in Michigan, where he was from, and got all that taken away by his wife, who had him declared incompetent. He ran away from mental institutions, got linked back in and started boxing again. And this is one of those things where it's like, boxing can be a beautifully tragic sport, and this happens today too. A boxing guy like Ad Walgast, people remembered him, and I remember that fight with Badley Nelson, 40 rounds. This was, legendary epic stuff. This is a comic book superhero there, and the boxing public took him in. In California, he worked in the gyms, and they let him work out, and they gave him odd jobs, and they kept promising him fights and putting him off, so that, in his state of mind, he was always like, I got to fight next week, and he kept working out, and as he deteriorated, things got worse, but he was always practicing for the next fight, and that's how they put him off. And it's sort of the boxing community taking care of one of their own there, but again, the little things that happen around it get sad, you know what I mean? So the bottom line is Walgast fought again in 1917 and just was not doing well, didn't win, draws, and just was a shadow of his former self. Flabby fighting, in the middleweight division when he was a lightweight, and the whole case scenario was that he should retire. He should have probably retired in 1913, but everybody was telling him to retire. So it's 1919 now, and if you look back at American history, this was right around the time. You're a boxing guy, you may have looked at the old periodicals and things like that. The magazines are rife with, hey, buy a pill, buy some type of mix or cream or anything like that, to help you with everything from hard-ons to whatever. At any rate, or with charlatans able to advertise to the nation in newspapers and no real, USDA or anything like that to approve stuff. They were going hog wild with stuff. And Ad Walgast got a hold of a doctor that opened his scrotum and inserted goat balls into his scrotum and just left him there. It wasn't like a true implant, because an implant implies, maybe they connected the veins and stuff. No, all he did was grab goat balls and shove them in there. And the idea was that goats were tough, that goats were resistant, and that goats were actually very virile as well, because, they actually say F like goats, you know what I mean? So that idea of the virility led Ad Walgast to actually have this operation done, and he fought 4 more fights. Now, at the end of the day, the goat testicles dissolve and they go away. There's maybe infection and things like that, but at the end of the day, there's no medical effect, and obviously the 4 fights he had in 1919 didn't lead to anything. He still wanted a world title shot, and he was still shot mentally and stuff like that. But here's the point is this guy was willing to have goat balls implanted into his own sack in order to win. And that should tell you just about all you need about human nature at some level, especially guys getting hit in the head. And I don't want to belittle that. I want to, bring the Ad Walgast example more to light, and that's bad, Guys are getting hit in the head, and maybe they're thinking they maybe need infrastructure and people helping them, make decisions and things like that. But, steroids are an easy decision to make. And steroids are one that are going to enhance the career in a noticeable manner right away. They feel more confident. They're going to make more money, etc., etc. The problem, among the many problems with it is that at the end of the day, there really is no real way to make sure that this doesn't happen. There's no way to police it. So in other words, the fighters are going to be living in a world where people are going to come at them with these offers, and some of them are going to take it. And you're dealing in a dangerous thing, because you're going to make a guy who's punching another guy in the head stronger. You're going to be dealing with a situation where it can really lead to deaths and things like that. That's why I'm not sure if the monitoring of the situation isn't better. And I can tell you that the matchmaking needs to improve. There's a lot of matchmaking, currently where, hey, let's bring, an aging former champion, move him up a weight class to challenge our newbie champion just to, get him a fight on his resume. That stuff shouldn't happen. And if you're policing and you're going to be like, and you consider, okay, and the kid's pretty strong and he's got, good medicine behind him, good science behind him, because that's the way the Russians think of it. They think of it as science, not cheating. So you change the way you think of it, and you say, this kid's got good science behind it. You don't want to put a guy naturally 15 pounds lighter in the ring with him, who's a little bit older, a little bit shot, and he's been knocked out before, because it could go badly. It could even be part of the assessment for matchmaking. But right now, with everything under the table, you can't even do that. So boxing and PEDs, we got a long way. And right now, we're going to keep going with the charade of the Canelo thing, where it's like, oh, Canelo got suspended, and the fight on May 5th is canceled, and, he's going to come back. And let's talk, as we wrap up the podcast here, about Canelo's comeback. This is what's going to be interesting. Maybe this was the first time he's been using steroids, or maybe it was even a tainted meat test. But if it wasn't, he's gotten pretty big and thick over the last couple of years, and there's some idea that he could have been maybe, the huge weight cuts that he put himself through and things like that. There's definitely some science behind them. So, with that retrospect, is he really going to stop? So when he stops, what are we going to see in the ring? Are we going to see an athlete that people are going to say, hey, what happened to him? He's not what he was. Do they give you that kind of edge? And that's a real reason to watch Canelo's next fight. I want to see that. Especially, if he comes back to fight Golovkin in September or November, that time frame, it's going to be Golovkin next, which means that's the highest, radar and spotlight that you're going to get. That's the major super fight for Canelo. He could get other opponents and things, and he could even make some other pretty big fights, but that's the one that's hanging right now. So you're going to get no better scrutiny than that. What do you want to do? Come in as sharp as you can? Or are you going to kick some bad habits and come in and people are going to say, whoa, what happened to him? I'm waiting to see. And that's a lot about the steroid question. We went through, a wide range of subjects there. I'm Miguel Iturrate. This has been Talking Shoot Boxing Podcast number 61. The steroid question is going to come up again, I'm sure of it, and we'll be right there to cover it for you.